All right, hello everyone. I'm going to try something a little different this time around and see if I can up the quality of these videos a little bit. And I was recently listening to some film critique on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And while listening to this YouTube video, it occurred to me that Wanda's actions in Wandavision provide a pretty good Marvel TV show example of why we really need to go to confession when we commit mortal sin, as opposed to simply asking for forgiveness in prayer. That's a very common thing that comes up in conversation, after all. Why do we need to bother going to confession? I ask that you consider this. In Wandavision, Wanda is grief-stricken, and she creates this fictional little world for herself, inspired by the sitcoms of her youth. Interesting stuff. Great premise for the show. But after a while, she realizes that the local people around her are being forced to act out these sitcom realities against their will. And when they're not directly part of her sitcom fantasy, they're just kind of like in this holding pattern where they can't even live their lives. So I'm going to show you the little clip of a scene where she's confronted with that. So here we go.
My husband's on a business trip. Tell him I love him. Not to come back here. Ever.
I'm exhausted.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. You're all going to be fine.
When you let us sleep, we have your nightmares.
No, that's not true. I've kept you safe in here. You feel at peace.
We feel your pain. Your grief is poisoning us.
No, stop.
Please, let us go.
If you won't let us go, just let us die. Please.
I will let you go. I will.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to be in the town at that time, would you? Well, that particular clip didn't state it, but at another point in the show, it features a town person begging Wanda to free her kid, who's been trapped in their bedroom since the whole thing started. So that's at least one child who has been completely isolated, not just from their loved ones, but from everyone. Total isolation in their bedroom for however long the show had been going on at that point. And that was what the film critiquer was talking about when it got my thoughts rolling along in this way. Just imagine the trauma that kid suffered. Imagine the therapy that they would need after all was said and done. I mean, that could be a lifelong emotional burden for anyone trapped in that situation. So that's a big deal. Can we agree that such a thing would qualify as a mortal sin? A major sin of grave importance? For all of the subjective consideration with what is or is not a mortal sin, can we at least agree that psychologically torturing a child for days, if not weeks on end, counts as something that is really bad and inexcusable? kind of feel like we should consider this common ground. Well, she does release everyone at the end of the show. That does happen. That is something. But in Doctor Strange and the Multitude of Madness, which happens a while after the show, it's established that Wanda didn't do anything else for those people except end the suffering. She stops the spell and just leaves. And what bothered me about that in Doctor Strange is she wants something. And in that movie, she acts like she's entitled to it, that she deserves it. And I'm not here to critique that movie. I'm just going to leave it at that. But as I've said before in other videos, my priest brain is always on. And I couldn't ignore the thought in my head that was saying, who cares what you want? Who are you, Wanda, to be free to pursue your wants and desires when you've left so many hurt and traumatized in your wake as a result of your actions? And that is the big idea of confession. When we commit sins, we do damage to someone or something, even if it's just ourselves. And we're supposed to deal with that actively and directly. When we do wrong and hurt people, we're not supposed to ignore that and pretend it didn't happen. Now, with minor sins, aka venial sins, we can deal with those things passively. In those cases, yes, pray to God, say you're sorry. You don't need to actively repair the damage of literally everything you do. If you cut someone off in traffic, you don't need to turn around and follow the other car and then get out and apologize to the other driver and then get back in your car and resume driving to work. That is obviously not an appropriate reaction to a relatively minor sin. Say a prayer, recognize that you could have been a safer driver, and be nice to someone later in the day. Hey, you know what? That's spiritual restitution. That is more than enough. Again, all things considered. Minor sins can be dealt with without putting the brakes on your whole life. But not with mortal sins. If something is truly bad enough, you have to deal with it. We say that mortal sin severs your relationship with God. If you are in mortal sin, you will not grow spiritually until you resolve the matter at hand. If you commit murder and then feel guilty and volunteer at an animal shelter, I'm sorry, but you're not going to somehow undo the crime. Doesn't matter how many puppy dogs you save. You have this major thing on your soul that you must resolve. You can say sorry to God. You should say sorry to God. But that just isn't good enough if the sin is that serious. Maybe it's a little weird hearing a priest say that. But if venial sins are scratches and bruises and sprains on your soul, then a mortal sin is like a bloody, infected wound. You can't, in good conscience, declare that you are a healthy person with a bloody, wounded shoulder that's just pussing with infection. I don't care how good your cholesterol levels are. There is something wrong with your body, and you need to take care of it. Even if the rest of you is perfectly fine, you need to go to the doctor sooner rather than later. Like most adults who have lived long enough to make a bad decision or two, I have lived this. I did something once. I caused real harm to someone. Not proud of it, don't get me wrong. It was someone I cared about, no less. And it didn't take me long to realize what I had done, and so I felt guilty and remorseful right away. And at this point in my life, priesthood was a distant possibility, but I was praying back then. That was easy. Feeling guilty, praying to God for forgiveness. But for at least a little while, I didn't do anything else about it. And so, I remained in my sin. It just didn't go away. I mean, my sense of shame died down after a while because I got used to it. But it was still weighing me down. And I could feel it. I was able to move on with my life only after I faced facts and tried to make amends. I went to confession at some point in the future as well. I don't remember exactly when the two parts of my life aligned, where I realized I had to accept what I had done and go to confession. I don't remember the time exactly, but both of them did happen eventually. And you know what? The person I'm referring to here, they said to my face that they didn't forgive me. And that was the last meaningful time we spoke. That's a shame, of course. I did my best. I was hoping for some two-way forgiveness there. But I did my best in the aftermath of a grave sin, and my soul was lighter as a result. So even if you're a person of prayer, which I hope you are, there are some matters in life that require more than that. And it's terrifying. It takes a great deal of bravery to voice your failings out loud. But that is a part of the healing process. As surely as needles are a necessary part of medicine, avoiding them will not actually make you better. As one other brief aside, several years ago, I tried and failed to explain confession to kindergartners. I'm not sure why I was trying in the first place, to be honest, but I was basically saying, and so kids, that's what confession is. You need to say sorry when you do wrong, and confession is saying sorry to God. And I explained that, and one of my favorite kids in the class, she just raises up her hand, and I go, yeah, what's your question? And she goes, my mama says that saying sorry don't cut it. And I was just stopped dead in my tracks. I'm like, okay, your mom has a point. Let's talk about that. Sometimes saying sorry don't cut it. Sometimes you gotta actually do something to show that you're sorrowful and are resolved to not make the same mistake twice. I still laugh at that memory a little bit. Anyway, to wrap up where we started with Wanda. I know I'm probably taking this too seriously. It's just a TV show. Doctor Strange and the Multitude of Madness is just a movie. But I love storytelling. I love all forms of storytelling because they teach us things about ourselves as human beings. And sometimes fiction communicates that better than nonfiction. And in this case, I can't take Wanda seriously as a character. She did great damage to many people and at least one child, and she made no effort to repair the damage before moving on to her next thing. And that bugs me. It would have been so much better. It would have made me more invested if they devoted just a couple of minutes showing Wanda genuinely apologizing to the townsfolk and doing at least something to express her remorse and a desire that everyone can recover as best as possible, even if some of them flatly refuse to forgive her, even if she can't undo much of the damage. The act of attempting to fix what was broken, that would have meant the world to me. And from there, she could have moved on. It doesn't need to be a perfect, ideal ending. Those are rare, after all. But the acknowledgement of wrongdoing, paired with a penance, an attempt to right what went wrong and to do better in the future, I am telling you, that's priceless. I just have one quick minor thing to state, just for the record. This little analysis of Wanda that I'm dabbling in is ignoring the implication that she didn't realize what was happening, at least for a good chunk of the show. So she didn't have full knowledge of her actions, at least at the start. I admit, if this was something that happened in reality, her ignorance would certainly be a factor in the question of her moral state of grace. But as this video that I'm recording now is meant to be educational on one specific point, we can afford to gloss over that for now. And that's the lesson for today. The importance of going to confession, of actively seeking to right what went wrong when you sin. It seems like a universal truth to me, because I'm equally talking about official church teaching, something that a kindergartner was able to understand, and you can point to it in Marvel movies. That's kind of a sign that this is something just about everybody can understand. Mortal sin needs direct action, because we need to deal with the things that cripple our souls. And I don't mean we need to do it because the Catholic Church says to. I mean, you need to deal with it because that is what will heal you. Some things are too major to be ignored in the desperate hope that they just go away on their own. I'm sorry, that does not happen with major problems. If you're Catholic, that means going to confession, declaring your sins before the Lord, doing an act of penance, and resolving to sin no more. Thank you, as always, for watching. I know this is probably my longest video I've ever filmed. I appreciate it. I hope it clarified something for you. Food for thought, as it were. And wherever you are, and whatever you do, may God be with you.